Hello! This is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and it is time for chapter 34 of Yarn Tales. Today we are on a rainy location here at Milford Lake on vacation. So, the book that we're going to talk about today is chapter 34 of my shawl. My Reading Shawl is an ongoing project here where I read books, I tell you a bit about them, and then I apply silly Kendra rules to my star rating for the book and add a segment to my Reading Shawl, which is an ongoing, tangible product of my intangible reading. Now, the books that we are at currently, I was reading for a readathon called Fantasy-a-thon. That was a readathon that took place over 10 days that encouraged you to read fantasy books and reach a number of challenges. So, today's book, I don't want to I'm going to mispronounce things anyways, but the book that I read was called What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky. It was a collection of short stories by Leslie Nneka Arima. I'm sure I mispronounced that, and I'm very sorry. But these were all stories that were either set in Nigeria or were about people of Nigerian descent. And I'm not really exactly sure why it was classified by my library as fantasy. I guess some of the short stories did qualify, but not all of them. Some of them were realistic fiction. But they were all things that I listened to via audiobook through Libby, which is the app for Overdrive, which I get from my county library. Now, this reached a few of my challenges for this readathon. This met the requirement to read a diverse fantasy, as well as reading a debut fantasy, and I also used this as my immerse yourself in a novel with a pampering you time block of reading time. I listened to this all in one evening by myself, had a little snack, had a little tea. It was quite a nice experience, and this book I was not really expecting to be all that great. I didn't really know anything about it. I just kind of came across it, and then I saw it was in fantasy and short stories, and it seemed like a good thing, because throwing a short story collection or an anthology into a readathon, I have found is kind of a nice way to break things up. So, this book got 4 stars. Since it's a number of short stories, it's hard to tell you a plot, because there really isn't one, but overall I enjoyed the voice of the author. I enjoyed the stories. They were varied, very varied, which made for an interesting kind of way to break up the readathon, and I enjoyed it. So, let's take a peek at my Reading Shawl. Since this is for a readathon, I did go ahead and add beads to my segment. There are 4 yarns that I'm using for my shawl, 1 for books with my kids, 1 for books for my Life's Library reading subscription where I get a book every 6 weeks, 1 for physical books by myself, and 1 for audiobooks by myself. Well, this falls into that audiobook by myself category. So the yarn that I'm using is Cattails in her DK base, and this is the color The Waste, which is part of her Wheel of Time collection, and I still continue to think this is my favorite color of Cattails yarn that I've used. And I've used a decent number at this point, but I just really have enjoyed this. And I went ahead and added beads along each of the types of yarn. I have a different pattern section I do, and then I do a row of textured single crochet for each star that I give the book. And I really like the way that the sections so far for Fantasy-a-thon are working up for these audiobooks. The beads set really nicely together. I decided to put a bead every other little V in my patterning, and so they kind of nestled, which is cool. And I used different colors for the 2 books, all within kind of the same greeny tones, because the overarching tone of this particular shawl is going to be the color green. That was my intent. I didn't necessarily pick super green yarns because I thought I would mix my wardrobe up a little, and so I kind of based all the colors around this The Waste yarn, but it was because I picked the green tones in it that I liked. And the cool thing with the beads that I picked for this one is that they kind of matched the cover of the book. I used a light green, a dark green, and a yellow, which the cover of the book had those tones in it. So I'm really enjoying how this is working up. Fantasy-a-thon was an interesting way for me to kind of broaden what fantasy books I was reading. Part of the reason the readathon was so long, a lot of readathons are only a weekend or a week. This one was 10 days because fantasy books lend themselves to being more lengthy. But I didn't want to just read one book, which if it was a lengthy one, I might only get through one or two. I wanted to read a number of books for the readathon, so I read shorter fantasy pieces, which made the choices a little bit more interesting and probably a little more off the beaten path, which, you know, I live off the beaten path. That's my happy place. So I would definitely recommend this book if you're looking for a diverse read. If you want to know a little bit about Nigeria and like some Nigerian history and culture, I feel like there was a good deal of like little snippets. I personally do not know a great amount about Nigeria. It would probably lead me to be interested in reading more things by Nigerian authors. That's definitely something that's on my list of things to look into, to see some more names and authors and, you know, kind of delve into that, which I think is one of the cool things about just kind of scrolling and picking books based on a genre or something like that, is you find these new little inlets that you could maybe find a new favorite book. You never know. If you'd like to make sure you don't miss out on any more of these chapters of my Reading Shawl and Yarn Tales here at Hooked by Happenstance, go ahead and subscribe below because I don't post on a regulated schedule. That is the best way to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And if you want to see the rest of the chapters of what I have read this year, there is a playlist here on the channel, as well as a playlist for last year's Yarn Tales, where I did a slightly different type of shawl. But if you'd like to hear the book reviews, those are all there. And I will see you all next time. Bye!